Welcome everyone to I4J's 10th interactive video Q&A session with the co-founder of University Ventures, Daniel Pianko. Did I say that properly, or is it Pianko?
It's Pianko, piano with a K.
Daniel Pianko. So Daniel's topic today is disrupting college. So how universities can survive the 21st century. My name is Ben Baldwin and I'm hosting the series for David and Vint. I started the series because thought we should be sharing and helping each other. This isn't my day job though. As a quick intro, and I'll get everybody to do intros, anybody who participates. Just as a quick intro, I'm the founder of a company called Scale Driver. We do innovation consulting. So instead of consultants, we match executives with real innovators in a process that predicts innovation success and accelerates it. So I obviously like these sorts of topics. And I like live video in particular because it's a great way to introduce ourselves to the group, have a synchronous conversation, share what we're working on, maybe even ask for help. And that's happened a couple times in here, so don't be afraid to ask for help. It's an engaging group, so it works pretty well to see each other and we get to know each other a little bit, even though we're all over the world probably right now. So I've started by putting everybody on mute. All I request is that if you have a question, please remember to introduce yourself first. And that's for Daniel's benefit, but also for the audience here. Plus, we're recording this so the audience afterwards, so they know who you are. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can either ping me with the chat tool on the right side of the page, or you can send me an email and I'll keep my eye out. And then I guess that's pretty much it. So I said we're recording the session, so be aware of that. It's an open link so that we can invite. Some of these people may not be in I4J, but that's it. So I'll get out of the way and turn it over to Daniel.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for getting on board. And as Ben said, I'm one of the founding partners of University Ventures. So I'll just tell you what my day job is. We are the first fund focused exclusively on higher education. We are very focused, and why I've enjoyed I4J so much, at the intersection between work and college. We have over 300 million under management, and we are really excited to take part. If you're not on our bi-weekly newsletter or haven't read our books and things like that, I'm happy to share with you. I know this is a global audience, but so frequently we are US focused, so I'm going to stick in that mold, and so I apologize, but a lot of this applies everywhere. The US is generally considered to have the best education system in the world. The problem with our education system is we tend to focus on what we call the 4 R's, which are research, real estate, as evidenced by this lazy river down here, rankings, as evidenced by the U.S. News World Report, and what we call the 4th R, which is RA for sports. But we actually don't know what the heck we're doing in higher education. We think Harvard is a good school because it was founded by John Harvard in 16 whatever it was founded in. And we don't know the equivalent. We've not had our Billy Bean moment in higher education where we actually figure out how we know our colleges and universities are doing a good job. We also have a crisis of affordability, and this is, I think, really ties into the work conversation, which is in the 70s, someone could have worked part-time and paid to go to school. Today, that same person would basically have to have a full-time job for half the year to pay for college. At the same time, the student loan crisis that everyone has read about has exploded. And part of what's driving this is on the bottom of the page, which is states have really, in the United States, at least, disinvested in higher education. And what we have now is a very high sticker price and less known outcomes. And a lot of this is created because of a crisis in governance. Our institutions tend to be old, have a lot of different stakeholders, people who show up because they have went to a school but don't necessarily add anything to the institution. And what's ended up happening is we have a growth of staff, which tends to be non-academic in nature. A growth in funding in the things we talked about, like real estate and athletics and not focused on teaching and learning. And the front page New York Times article that sort of made this all happen, that brought this to the forefront, was a series of stories on what are called lazy rivers. If you haven't seen a lazy river at a university, here is one. It is what it sounds like. It's a big, big pool where everyone can party. And what I love about the LSU one is, if you look in the picture here, you can actually see they've carved the LSU logo into the swimming pool so people can drift along. And I see Chally smiling at this, so you may have actually been there. So what happens? It means that people are losing faith in higher education, and 70% of universities have failed to meet their budget for enrollment that they projected, and most alumni are now saying that they are dissatisfied with their experience. And Mitch Daniels, who became the president of Purdue after being the governor of Indiana, said one of my favorite things, which was higher education has to get past the take our word for it era, because increasingly people aren't. So what does that mean? Basically, if you're at Harvard, you're fine. We think that higher education is going to go through the same shakeout that many industries have gone through, whether you're banks or insurance companies or retailers like JCPenney or Gap or restaurants. What happens when technology and disruption happens is basically the middle gets hollowed out, and you see basically, if you think about sort of the way it used to be in the banking industry or the retail business or the restaurant business, is the chart on the bottom left, where everyone's sort of clustered in the middle. What's going to happen is you're going to have Walmart be successful, but you're also going to have Saks Fifth Avenue be successful. And what happens is everything in the middle gets hollowed out. Now, why are people asking more of their colleges? Why is things starting to happen in college? Because colleges, there's a huge gap. Colleges become the biggest investment people make. They graduate with $100,000 in debt. And employers aren't really hiring them in the same way. Only 11% of graduating students, 11% of employers think graduating students have the competencies needed to be successful in business. An interesting note that is not on the slide, roughly 83%, I believe, of provosts think that their students are graduating with the skills employers want. So you've got this sort of massive disconnect between what employers think and what provosts think. And so what we're seeing is, it's weird, what we're seeing is similar to what we're seeing across the entire country, is sort of people who are discontented rise up. And you're seeing this on college campuses, and some of this is because of the broader social interactions, but a lot of this is because people feel like the system isn't working for them economically. And there was a big New Yorker piece written about this, about how basically what students really want is to feel like they have a pathway from being at home to getting their first job. And when that doesn't exist, or they feel like there's no social justice around what they're doing, people tend to question what's going on. And we call this happened in technology. This is the full stack approach to education. So what is the education stack? For most people, and I'm saying outside of the elites, for the 90% of people who go to state universities, colleges, etc., at the end of your education, you're looking for a job. And we've seen a number of companies, the full stack started with Apple when they came out with their iPad, or iPhones, and it was sort of a full package. What is the equivalent in higher education? And what we're seeing is innovative entities develop full stack programs, boot camps. Many of you guys are familiar with boot camps. This is, you go for 3 to 6 months, you learn to be a programmer, and at the end of it, you're basically guaranteed a job. There are also alternative models like Year Up, which trains poor kids from the inner cities, You have Full Bridge program, which helps people who need softer skills. And these are becoming very, very popular as the traditional universities aren't doing their job, aren't completing this full stack relationship. This looks different than virtually every other university you could imagine, because take Galvanize for an example, where full disclosure, we're an investor. You have a look and feel that's totally different. You have, if you see in the top left, you'll see companies at office, like community space, all alongside. And those companies that are in the Galvanize facility are also hiring the interns, providing the instructors, and in effect, working and learning become synonymous. And what's really interesting here is it doesn't mean that it's necessarily excluded from traditional universities. We do offer a Master's of Engineering at Galvanize. But what you're seeing is and most people who come to Galvanize for education actually have a college degree. 90% have a college degree, but they are, as the bottom left indicates, the unemployed, the underemployed, and the unhappily employed. The person who's got the unhappily employed actually has a great job, had a great job at a big financial services institution, but he just wasn't happy. And when you take this model, which, you know, if you're familiar with the bootcamp model, it's 6 months, 3 to 6 months of very intensive training to become a coder. And then, you know, they've got 95, 100, close to 100% kind of placement rates, as opposed to sort of a 4-year college degree. If you think about, you could think about just-in-time models for things like healthcare. So your person who takes your blood at a hospital, right now, many of those people take 12, 18, 24 months programs to learn to take your blood. You can think about it around energy, people who fix pipelines when they break, biotech, financial services, etc. What's really important is the interface. We like to say that going to community college in this country, there are 5 million people go to community college in the United States. It's roughly 25% of the total college-going population. We sometimes think that going to community college is kind of like going to the Department of Motor Vehicles. And what people are looking for is, we're in an age where you have Netflix. So people are looking for this transition in higher education from the top image of going to the DMV to the bottom image of, hey, like, I want to watch Lifeguard this week, but next week I might want to watch Lillehammer. And you know, you're looking at different types of programs that are short access, that lead directly to well-paid jobs. And without the sort of complexity of, you know, a traditional university with lots of different departments. Right now, we think that the colleges will kind of continue doing what they're doing. As I said, 90% of Galvanize students went to college and have a college degree. But what we think is developing is sort of this whole network of pre-hire training, where colleges and third parties are trying to figure out how to fill this gap. And this gap is really, really tied in with I4J is doing, which is, okay, how do you do skills-based education and training, proactive matching of students with employers. So we have a company called Reviture, which I think I'll talk about in a few minutes, where you literally give kids a test when they're seniors in college, and depending on how they do, you say to them, look, if you can pass a boot camp or a pre-hire training program, I will guarantee you a job. And what this means, this chart on 21 is really the heart of what we think is going to happen. If you think about the access on the left is whether you have a guaranteed job at the end of it. And then on the top is whether or not it's going to cost you money to go to school. So take the top left bucket, which is, okay, the student's going to pay and they're not guaranteed an outcome. That incidentally is what college is today. So you pay a lot of money to go to college and you're not guaranteed an outcome. That would be a low value job like a medical assistant. Now, if you go to the bottom left quadrant, you might say, hey, I want to be a nurse. Student pay, but you're basically guaranteed an outcome. Anyone who graduates with a nursing degree is effectively guaranteed an outcome. You may also find areas that where you don't have a guaranteed outcome, but because industry needs so many of them, like sonographers, that they're willing to pay for training programs. And you may also find areas like what Reviture is doing, or certain very technical skills, where employers are basically willing to fund students and guarantee them jobs if they're already employed. We kind of blow this out into another matrix, which is how these intermediaries, this whole pre-hire concept, right, where employers don't think they're getting good people, and the colleges think they're doing a good job. That kind of middle that was on the prior slide. Some of these, B2C means consumers are paying, B2B means businesses are paying, and B2U means the university is paying. And then along the left, we have kind of examples of the types of products that people are selling. So you've got a ton of boot camps out there. Universities are starting to pay for boot camps for their kids because they know that their kids aren't going to get jobs without them. These are some examples. So along the top, you've got, you've got sort of different people filling in these different pieces of, say, placing students with employers. So take the bottom right corner, you have a company like Credly or Parchment, which is literally trying to help connect students to jobs through credentialing. So they say, okay, this person knows this, and the universities are paying. So the university is saying, hey, it's important to me that my students know, that the employers know that my students know certain things. And I'm going to talk about it later, but you'll notice that LinkedIn is on this chart. This is how most of the people on this web chat probably went through their career development. They went to really good schools. They went to Harvard or Columbia. Then they got a job at McKinsey or Goldman, which sort of recruited on campus. That is not the way, that is sort of a pipeline that doesn't exist for most people. Two things are happening. One is Goldman Sachs isn't getting the people they want, so they're increasingly recruiting at more and more schools. And students are less and less happy in these careers, right? They want to be at tech companies. They want to be doing other things. They want to be in healthcare. And those organizations don't necessarily recruit on those campuses. So Andy Chan, who incidentally was my career counselor at Stanford, now runs career counseling at Wake Forest. And he basically says, well, career services must die. Why? Because career services are really not very good on most campuses. So what we're looking at is what we call Career Services 2.0, which is, okay, this is where the university actually plays the role of integrating between the college and the workforce, and where career services is actually integrated into the whole experience, where students will be doing e-portfolios, creating their skills passports, creating a set of credentials while they're in school. And then at the end, when someone is in their junior or senior year, the career service office can say, look, we're going to help you, connect you with this boot camp to make sure that you get the last mile of training from your high school, your college thesis to your job at IBM. Reviture is a company that I mentioned to you earlier, one of our portfolio companies, and it's focused on the IT sector. I'm focusing on IT because that's I4J is sort of a Silicon Valley type organization. But Reviture creates structured pathways for college students in the career world. 3,000 students have gone through Reviture in partnership with 600 universities. And what Reviture does is takes students with no IT background, who may have been math majors, stats majors, bio majors, and it says to you, look, if you can pass this test, we will and go through a boot camp, we will guarantee you a job, and not just your first job, but actually your second job as well. And so this is kind of a very unique type of a career pathway. These are some of the people who've gone through Reviture. So you'll see they went to college. They got degrees in things that ranged from systems engineering to English. Then they went to a boot camp where they learned a very specific skill. And then they ended up getting placed in a job with an existing Reviture client. All of this from their junior, summer of junior year through to job was created, that opportunity, that kind of pathway was created by Reviture. So what happens when students realize they can start doing this themselves? How am I doing on time, Ben, or anybody else? Thumbs up, thumbs down, medium? thumbs up.
Good. I know everybody's going to have questions.
Okay, good. If you think about it, what becomes the currency in this world is what you actually know, is competencies. And we put competencies at the center because individuals know they need competencies, because they need to show their employers that they have competencies, and educational institutions need to help students get those competencies. And what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing competency marketplaces. I'm going to be able to put on my LinkedIn portfolio that I know how to be, program in machine learning or something else. And then suddenly that becomes your strategy, your way of getting a job and your pathway for getting a job. And LinkedIn basically has done this. And we usually don't think about LinkedIn as an education company, but we usually think of LinkedIn as going to become the ultimate education company. They have a profile for everybody, right? They know what you know. And they can say to you, hey, you are a director level. To be a VP, you need these 5 or 6 competencies. Let me help you get them. LinkedIn's already doing this. They've acquired Bright.com, which is a competency marketplace. They acquired Lynda, which actually provides the education. And they've invested close to $2 billion in the last year or so, 2 years, to build a series of companies that are helping college graduates onto its platform and into work. And then so what this does is it puts pressure on the colleges and universities, because suddenly they have to, what we call, double click on the degree. It's not just enough to get an A in calculus. You need, or an A in accounting. You need to say, well, look, this person knows accounting, but they're not just accounting, but they know double entry bookkeeping, or they know cost accounting, or other things, because people are asking for much more specialized intelligence about what people want. And then what you have happen is, well, if you're really focused on competencies, well, who knows competencies better than anybody else? Well, companies like Manpower, Robert Half, which staff massive, well, if you're a company, you're calling Manpower up to say, hey, I need 50 programmers in Duluth, Minnesota next week because a job just came up. And the power of this competency marketplace is that it basically is this last mile that I4J is really focused on, which is, okay, how do we track people, know what they can do, and actually connect the 5 million job openings with the 15, 20 million unemployed people in this country. A little bit more on this, and then really LinkedIn would become sort of the future of education for many people. And I'll just close with remember the interface, and remember how colleges will change and move from the top image to the bottom image, and where you want to be in that. I'll close with one kind of very slightly bomb in the theater type of thing, which is, okay, well, what will happen to degrees in the future? And will degrees go the way of debutantes? The debutante balls. Degrees share a lot of characteristics with debutantes. There's unclear return on investment, and too few people actually graduate. We didn't talk about this earlier, but something like 30% of Americans actually have a degree. So I will leave you with that concept as you think about how these competency-based marketplaces will replace or supplement traditional universities, and see what questions come up from the group.
Awesome, thank you. So unusually, David has his hand up, so I'll let David ask the first question. That was a joke. He always has good questions. He has some really unique experiences in this space.
Maybe it is the first time. So, Daniel, awesome. This is an absolutely fantastic lecture. It's even richer than I thought it was going to be. So I have just a question. Seeing today, people can be productive at the age of 10, basically. They can do stuff that's worth money on the market. And now we're at the stage where basically everybody has to wait until they're 20-something so that they have a college degree and can apply for a job that you didn't need a college degree for earlier. And it's just what you bring up. You know, you have to pay a lot of thousands of dollars, and then you don't even know that you get a job, and you're older than before. So what's your vision here? You know, what will be the future of college education? I mean, what do you believe is the future, and what age do you think is a good age for people to start working for money?
Well, I'm reading Ken Follett, Pillars of the Earth, where, you know, if you were 14 and not working in the Middle Ages, you were clearly behind the times. I actually think that, and if you think about sort of the, you know, when do you start? Well, they're two separate questions. When do you start working? The amazing thing about technology is you can actually start working earlier. So you have all these stories about incredibly skilled programmers, technicians, et cetera, who are actually making a lot of money early. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of, you know, the Bill Gates dropped out because technology allows younger people who are selling on eBay, right? I mean, eBay, you could be an Uber driver as soon as you have your driver's license. So there are things that are happening with technology that are actually kind of switching, where it used to be that you needed to have a college degree to get a job. And in fact, what a lot of technologists are doing is they're lowering that age by bringing the technology to be more accessible to people. So that's one bit. The second bit is when you think about what the future of college is, colleges are about to go through, if you look at the Republican platform, and you may not agree, or, you know, you may dislike the Republican Party this week, but David, you know, I have a sense for the politics of this group. But they basically said, look, we're going to stop giving Title IV financial aid to students in their platform. And the reason for that is because colleges and universities have lost the respect of much of the political and economic class. And that is amazing, because if you think about the institutions in our society, colleges are, besides the Catholic Church, some of the oldest institutions in our society. We have had degrees and universities since 1088 in Bologna. So the fact that in the space of less than a generation, colleges and universities are now, you know, the focus where one of our two political parties are basically saying, hey, you know, college is no longer a public good, and we're going to defund college, and every state is defunding college. I think you've got a real moment in time, which is basically why we do what we do, where colleges and universities are thinking, well, what should we be doing? How do we change? And I think the isomorphism, right, that first slide, isomorphism means everyone wants to look the same. That is going to shift. You can no longer be the generalist institution that, you know, you go to that's kind of down the street from you. You need to be special. And if there's one, you know, you need to be really good at healthcare. You need to be an elite research institution. You need to be really good at engineering. You need to be good at technical training, vocational training. You need to be good at something. Otherwise, you are going to be left behind. Did I answer your question, David?
Almost. I like this, you know, the 1,000-year history of college degrees from Bologna to Bologna. But that should be the title of, I didn't do a special presentation, but from Bologna to Bologna, it would be a good one. Yeah, it's a gift to you. There you go. So, no, but I'm still wondering, you know, is college actually going to become high school again? Or, you know, are people going to work for money at the same go as they educate? Because right now we have the paradigm that first you learn.
The paradigm doesn't exist, right? People think that because they went to college the way you probably went to college. I don't know your background or people on the phone, but most people had enough money that when they were 18 and enough, they were on a track that when they turned 18, they went to college and they graduated when they were 22. today in America, at least, that's like less than 20% of the college-going population. Most people in post-secondary education are not 18 to 25. They are working. I think something like 80% of students are not traditional on at least one metric, right? So either their age, their working status, their parental status, whether, you know, so if you look at sort of the definitions of traditional students, most students are already out of your framework. It's the general cognitive dissonance between public perception and reality, which is creating this baloney effect, to use your words. Most people are not your traditional student.
Any other questions from folks?
I've got a question.
Vikram,
This is
your quick intro and then ask your question.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Vikram. I run a company out of Toronto called EduSite. And what we do is help teachers in K-12 education document different kinds of data about their kids' learning. So that includes grades, but increasingly what we're seeing is a shift away from grades. So a lot of teachers and a lot of schools and districts are starting to adopt competency-based models. And so it's interesting because you mentioned a lot of issues around moving towards competency in higher education. But it sounds like, so it's clear that that's what employers value, knowing what skills you have and being able to, you know, pick the students with the right skills. And it's starting to become clear in K-12 that grades or any other arbitrary metric like that isn't valuable so much as competencies and knowing how students are progressing towards mastering certain skills. So at what point does both of those pressures create incentive in higher ed and post-secondary education? So when does a Harvard embrace a competency-based model? What does that look like? What needs to happen to get there?
Yeah, I think it gets back to Harvard won't embrace it more than likely, but other people will. And it depends on where in the Harvard ecosystem, right? Harvard Medical School needs to embrace competencies because that's how you pass the USMLE, which gets you a doctorate, makes you a doctor. This shift to competencies is being thwarted by regulation and faculty, and frankly students. So very few competency-based programs are actually getting traction with students. They don't like it. They like to be able to, many students, and this is just driven by sort of numbers, right? Most students are still in traditional universities, and even when given the option of a competency-based approach as opposed to a traditional lecture-based approach, they're pretty happy with the lecture-based approach. And so what I think you're going to start to see is until the students, the employers, push governance and faculty and the institutions themselves, you're not going to see a shift. And I think that it's going to come first from the employers, because the employers, 11% of employers think that their students that the students graduating are prepared. And that's not an acceptable number. And you're going to see that's why we put it in the chart with the pre-hire training. The employers are coming in saying, I'm not hiring your students unless they have X, Y, and Z skills. And that's really a driving force. So I think the employers will impact the colleges and the students. The students will say, oh, I need this, and the colleges will react. I think we're probably inning 2 of a 9-inning game, to use an American analogy.
Yeah. So in
the first quarter in a hockey match.
Cool. So in that framework, if employers, let's say the McKinseys and the Goldman Sachs of the world, decide to stop recruiting on campus, or students show that they don't care about those firms because, like you said, that's a very low proportion of the students that actually make that path, is that enough pressure for places like Harvard to start to take note? Because at some point, if that combines with all these other people disrupting, like the LinkedIns and the Revitures of the world, where students are going through that, do they recognize there's a gap?
I think the first thing everyone needs to do is Harvard is a unique institution. There are probably 10, maybe 50 institutions in the world that are like Harvard. And if you use Harvard as your benchmark, you're going to get lost. You've got 20 million people in this country in higher education, and only, 30,000 of them go to Harvard, and maybe a million all in go to sort of elite schools. Most people are not going to elite schools. So ignore Harvard for a minute. Yes, I mean, if you're not getting a job and you invest $50,000 in an education and you don't get a job, at the end of it, you're going to be pissed. And that's what's really happening right now. I mean, I hate to say, because there's real social inequality, and the economic dislocation in the world is impacting higher ed. And I don't think that until that until that goes back to where we have been, in the 90s, where people were just graduating, getting jobs, that inability to get a job is what's driving this economic dislocation, is driving sort of this social dislocation. And that's impacting the universities, it's impacting our politics, it's impacting everything. That's what the most interesting part of the I4J discussion group is this question of how do we reconnect people with jobs in a period of time of massive automation, of massive change in technology. And traditionally, if you went to college, you got a job that paid you a lot of money, or even if you went to high school. And that framework is breaking down. And when that breaks down, people start looking around for other models. And that's the point in time we're at right now, where they're saying, I can spend $50,000 on a master's degree, and I don't know what happens afterwards, or I can spend $20,000, go to Galvanize for 6 months, and have a 98% job placement rate where I'm going to make $100,000 a year. Well, any rational individual is going to make that trade to Galvanize over master's degrees. Law schools, right? Law schools are the canary in the coal mine for higher education. Law school graduates are just not getting the jobs that they used to get. And they're taking on $100,000 of debt, and basically, graduating poor. They're unhappy. And that's making the front page of the newspaper. Psychologists are graduating poor. And what you're seeing is that that's starting to come down earlier and earlier, right? So now if you're a community college graduate, you're graduating poor. And you're like, I just went to community college. I was supposed to get a job. That's like the definition of vocational training. And that transition is impacting what schools people go to, why they go to school, what they do. And I'll tell you, Vikram, like this, I think we're only in the second or third inning of a 9-inning game. But you're really starting to see that first in these high demand areas. And that chart of sort of, college is in the worst quadrant. You pay a lot of money and you're not sure of an outcome. That doesn't last very long.
Cool. So we have Cosmin, David, and then we'll swing it around. I think Vikram has another follow-on, but to Cosmin and David first. Cosmin?
So my question was, I liked the slide about the need for independence.
Quick intro. I'm going to be militant about intros.
Oh, yeah. So my name is Cosmin. My background is actually in psychology, but my other background is in medicine. I'm a medical doctor, and I came here and I studied psychology because I thought being a medical doctor is extremely boring, although very well paid compared to psychology. So now I'm doing things around those lines and using also the idea of intercultural optimization of relationship. So my question, I like the slide, when you said like the 1960s, the need for independence, which anyway lasted about 15 minutes, I would say, as Leonard Cohen says. But today you're saying that there is a need for reassurance. And, I feel like this is somehow a fundamental ambiguity that we all face. How much independence can I get, but how much belonging do I actually need in order to feel that independence? Because otherwise, I feel stressed out if I don't belong. So it's true what you're saying, but I think that Harvard and Stanford and other, not that necessarily they are similar, but Ivy League universities somehow offer this sense of belonging on one hand, but also this glamour of belonging. to something that is free. So I'm thinking, how are we going to deal with that? Because the perception, it's so important. If you look on Facebook, everybody wants likes, and they're spending hours and days and years of their life trying to get those likes. So I wonder, do you think that that's going to be extinguished soon enough? You know?
Everyone's fragile ego needs to be stoked by likes on Facebook. I mean, it's very true. No, I think that this is a different question. I know there's a huge I4J thread on this, but I think that automation is having this impact where you're feeling disassociated with people, and the way you kind of reconnect with people is through Facebook and other things and sort of friendships over that. But I think as it relates to higher education and disruption, students aren't on campus. What makes the Ivy League universities unique is that students come together, they're in Greek life together, they go to frat parties together, they party together, they go to the football game together, they do all this stuff together. But back to this fundamental point, most students don't care about that stuff after a certain point, right? That feeling of I want to go to the football stadium, that mattered when I was 18. That doesn't matter when I'm 33. And most people in higher education are 33. And so, the psychology of belonging becomes a lot less important the older you get in terms of your university. But what we find when we run classes, one of the most interesting things is belonging to a cohort becomes very important. So for these non-traditional students, what becomes most important is it's like, when you talk to soldiers about why they jump on a grenade, they don't jump on a grenade for their country. They don't jump on the grenade because the general told them to. They jump on the grenade because Roger in the foxhole next to him was going to die if he doesn't jump on the grenade. And I know this might be a stretch, but when you look at higher education specifically, and you put kids in cohorts where 10 people learn together, it's over a period of a semester, their likelihood of graduation is a lot higher. So there are two different types of belonging. One is sort of, and I think that what is going to go away, what's going to go away is the traditional image of belonging that's focused on football team. What's going to become more important is belonging through the things you do, the competencies you're interested in. If you're at a boot camp, in a tech boot camp, that is the most bonding experience. It's like going through basic training together. That's the type of experience people need. And that's where I think you're going to see your psychology, brain play out. We actually run 2 medical schools, one in Europe, one in the US. And that is actually, ironically, where competencies we think are going to explode first. And anyway, Ben, I know there's a lot of people in the queue, so.
Yeah, David has another quick question.
Yeah, I just sort of adding some examples that strengthens your case, I believe, Daniel. So like 20 years ago, I was director at a foundation in Sweden. Anders Flodström, another I4J, hired me there. And I was made responsible for funding a new program for research and collaboration between regional colleges and industry. They'd never had research funding before. And it went very well. We built a model so that we could fund them, we could fund them as much as the industry funded them.
Right.
So and this had marvelous effects, actually, because, these small colleges, first of all, they weren't ivory towers, right? So they could work with industry. They were in small towns. So the Rotary Club basically was the networking club already. And, they were open to new things. So, low real estate prices, everything. And this turned out to be a total success. So today, actually, these regional colleges are becoming almost better than the big universities. The universities can't change. And when I see the United States here, and you have the state universities, I think you could very much do the same model here. It might be that, you know, the state universities can become actually more relevant than the big universities.
Right. And, you know, I think that's actually what's going. Well, the problem here, well, in Sweden, the state universities will never lose support of the state. What's happened in the United States is actually state level funding for their university systems on average is down over 50% since about 2008. The problem for many state institutions here is that they have lost the faith of the political establishment. And you may, again, the politics, you know, Paul Krugman writes about this a lot, but it's if 80, 90, 100% of your faculty is not just Democrat, but sort of bordering on communist, right, which is effective. I mean, there are all these studies coming out that, you know, 90+% of sociologists are left of the Democratic Party platform. When that starts to happen, you inject yourself in the political debate in a way that's not beneficial to state universities, because not only are they not getting kids jobs, they're not serving as economic engines. Politically, they're to the left of virtually every state legislature. And so what's happening is states are defunding higher education. So you got this double whammy where you're losing, you know, the politics are wrong for the institutions, you know, and 33% of state houses are controlled by Republicans. So the politics are wrong, and you're not creating economic value. So the states are defunding higher education.
Right.
But your insight is 100% right, which is the big institutions aren't making these shifts. The people who are making these shifts are the institutions under pressure, and they are motivated by the changes in the economics. One of the first slides I put up is something like 70% of colleges are not making their enrollment targets.
Right.
That's pretty shocking.
Well, actually, you know, maybe I was wrong doing the parallel with state colleges, because I think what you need is a small college that's fairly new, that already, you know, in a rather small place where there are some companies and you have a Rotary Club. And because then the companies will be happy to move into campus.
Right.
And what's more, you know, it's like they were actually funding these places pretty much. And they told me, you know what, we actually don't fund them because we are interested in the professors' research. We're interested in their students, so we fund them. And, you know, that was a great insight for me.
Do you remember that chart where, you know, college is here, right, because that you pay a lot of money and aren't guaranteed a result?
Right.
What you're talking about is the top right quadrant, which is where we want to get, which is the employer saying, I'm going to fund this program either because I want to recruit the specific, I want David to join me, right? Or I'm going to fund this program because the industry really needs us. You know, I mentioned I just came back from Cyprus earlier. You know, the maritime industry, apparently Cyprus has the largest one of the largest ship management industries. And literally the industry in Cyprus is coming together and saying, we don't have enough people in our industry. And Cyprus, like a 20% unemployment rate. And we are going to literally contribute we're going to fund scholarships, and we're going to contribute ships, like physical ships and engines and things, to train people, because, you know, we as an industry need more people in our industry. And I think that's what you're describing, David, and that's the future, where, you know, whether it's technology or shipbuilding or aviation, where the industry groups get together, they partner with colleges and universities, and that's kind of where
the college that will accept getting the ship and doing a course around it, they will do well.
Right. Amen.
Cool.
And when you convince Stanford to do that, you let me know.
So we have about 5 minutes. We'll check in. I think we have a question from Vikram, and then I think Cosmin has one, but 5-minute time check.
Cool.
Great, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we touched upon was this perception of belonging and how that's really not coming from the place people think it's coming from. But there's another perception which is interesting, is that college is where people learn to become adults, and you grow up and you mature. And I feel like this is a pretty recent perception because as late as the 70s, 80s, most people didn't go to college. And somehow in pop culture between then and now, college is this rite of passage. And how do you fight that perception amongst people and then you do other paths?
Do you know where the term adolescent comes from?
No.
Okay. In about 1820, a sociologist who, a very funny set of letters from his mother, saying, you're now 27, you don't have a job, and you're getting your PhD. What is this PhD thing? And this is in like 1820. And he wrote back, there's this transition point between childhood and adulthood. And when you're in your mid-20s, you're trying to figure out what that is, and that's adolescence.
Right.
In our society, we've moved adolescence down from mid-20s, late 20s to 15, 18 years old. And so I don't know if I think belonging. I mean, you're focused on belonging, and I think that. Colleges do different things, and this gets back to what the term isomorphism, right? There is going to be a set of people who look to college to do what you just described. They're going to either be wealthy enough or have enough raw intelligence or something where they can spend those years between 18 and 22 on an idyllic college campus learning to be an adult. If you lived 100 years ago, you did not have that luxury. And I guess the economic situation we're in right now is increasingly people don't have that luxury again, right? And it gets back to David's kind of the way he started. Well, shouldn't you work earlier? Or Cosmin just posted, education boot camps partner with city colleges, state colleges, resolving access to untapped talent. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that, which is where people are saying to the city colleges, state colleges, this isn't working, right? I am not getting, society is not getting anything out of History 101, where people sit in a big lecture hall, get talked to by a talking head about, Carthaginian shipbuilding techniques.
Yep.
And that just it's not a good idea for anybody.
Unless you're from Cyprus.
Although the Carthaginians were North African, I think. Right? Am I getting this right? Yeah, the Carthaginians were North African, right? Someone help me out here. And so I think where you're going to, and where sort of the I4J can really, I think, have an impact is to take what you're saying and take there and bring it forward, right? It's okay when you show up to school. It's not quite the European model where you're 16, you take a test, and you decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life, because I'm not sure that's the right approach. But right now we've got an approach where you can basically get a bachelor's degree in basket weaving. I got a major in the history of the city of New York. I mean, it's at Columbia University. It's the least useful major possible. And I was lucky enough that I ended up in a place that had a training program and trained me. But most people don't have that luxury. Most companies don't have that luxury anymore. And so I think this concept of what college is and why it's useful and why people pay money is going to shift. You're still going to have the people who are wealthy enough or smart enough, whatever, to go to Harvard. And that is great for those people. There's always someone who's going to buy a Mercedes-Benz, S550. Most people can't afford a Mercedes-Benz S550. I would personally get a Tesla, but let's get off of that. And not everyone's going to afford a Tesla, so they're going to get the Model S, so they're going to get the 3 or whatever it is. And so when you're deciding to get to 3 instead of the Model S, you're going to give up certain things. You're going to give up 4 years on a college campus because you're going to go. You're going to get some of your courses online. You're going to get that intro to history course online. You're then going to show up at college, whether state college or city college. You say, hey, I did my initial stuff online. I paid $3,000 for it instead of $50,000 for it. And now I'm ready to be a coder. And so now I'm going to do a 6-month boot camp that, by the way, counts for college credit. And I'm going to piece together what I'm doing. And I think that's really colleges that are able to serve more sort of the platform where you're plugging in what you need. This is kind of David's point, right? The maritime industry or the coding industry will come in and say, hey, we need this. And that's going to be what drives, I think where this kind of connection in I4J and college will happen. And I think I'm at 2:30.
You are. Awesome. Well, thank you, Daniel. That is, it's great. Good energy. I sent Daniel a note saying this is awesome. We love it when we have people bouncing around. It's because I'm one of those, maybe. I don't know what it is. But great energy. Obviously, education is something important to everybody. We don't need to do it anymore because we've already done our education and we're already educated. So that's where it stops, right? No, it's interesting. I mean, I think about my children and the world that they're going to grow up in, and you know, it's confusing as to how this is shifting, because this is the foundation for so much stuff, so much technology.
It's fun. If I could say one thing, everyone asks me this, and it's sort of the next thing I'm writing about, so I'd love everyone's kind of thoughts on this. You know, all of us in the playgrounds want to get our kids into Harvard. Like, that's our goal. And this presupposes two things. One, that our kids will want to go to Harvard. And two, that Harvard will use the same methodologies that we're used to accept their kids. And I'll end with that, because I think everyone, as they think about what they use how they educate their kids, can think about what that impacts their child.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Daniel. That was great. I really appreciate everybody's questions. Really well thought through. And this has been one of my favorite discussions. So stay tuned for the next live video Q&A. And of course, anyone on the call, please let me know if you want to either present or present again. Next up is Steve Denning. It will be the very quiet topic of why U.S. entrepreneurship is dying. And I know that he'll be very subtle. It'll be a very good discussion. So I invite everybody to join in and reach out to me if you have any interest in presenting yourselves. I'm ben@scaledriver.com. And with that, that's it. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.